One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. I love how this audience is so invested in your financial and legal, like all the things, right, that you have to legitimize your business on the back end. And so this is why we have people that are CPAs and lawyers. And you're just going to be so excited about today's guest because he is a licensed attorney and tax professional. So it's like boom, boom, double whammy. And it's just going to be so much fun because I know y'all always have questions about running a business, especially when it comes to running a business with a podcast. And I've gotten so many questions over the years, and I always feel like I feel like I need a disclaimer tattooed on my forehead. I am not I was going to say legitimized. I'm not able to give you legal advice, right? I'm not able to give you financial advice because this isn't my thing. This is why I have professionals come onto the show and tell you all of these things. And so today's guest, like I said, it's Braden Drake. I'm so excited for y'all to meet Braden. We had a fantastic conversation, and he's someone that I know through the Amy Porterfield circle. We have been in momentum together, and he's had so much success in really putting himself out there as someone who is online in a really big way with his courses and serving his community. And we're going to talk about how he transitioned into that and what the business looks like for him. But let me give you a little backstory on Braden. So he is a California licensed attorney and tax professional. His tagline is your gay best friend, here to help you get your legal and tax stuff together. We're going to talk about that in a second. Braden works primarily with service-based creative small business owners through his courses where he educates on contracts, business entities, cash flow systems, and taxes. All the things that people come to me that listen to me, like if you're in any of these businesses and you're like, my topic is boring, or this is something I don't know if I could have a podcast about it. Well, Braden has a podcast about it. Okay. So I'm just going to default to him, and I want you to go listen to his show because he does this so well. We're going to talk about his podcast. We're going to talk about all the things, but I wanted to give a disclaimer, right? I told y'all I don't give legal and tax advice, but the disclaimer for today's episode is there is a lot of adult language. Okay. I wanted to give you the forewarning now. That's why we have the E for explicit content. We talk about some things in this episode, and I wanted to give you the heads up in case you need to put in your AirPods or listen to this when you don't have the kiddos around, whatever you got to do. But this conversation is so good, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So here's my conversation with Braden. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I have an extra special guest with you today, or with all of us today, and that is Braden. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I have lots of questions because people are always asking me. I'm like, I am in no way any kind of legal expert. Don't ask me your legal questions. I am a very risk averse person. So anytime anybody asks me anything, I throw out disclaimers left and right. And I'm like, I just want y'all to know I'm really not qualified to do any of these things you're asking me for. And I'm going to point you to the direction of someone that does. And that's someone like Braden. So
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about what you do.
I probably should give more disclaimers. I probably don't. So I'll give mine now. None of this is legal advice, all that good stuff. So with that, back to your question, my background, hello everyone. My name is Braden. I'm a California licensed attorney, originally from Indiana. So I'm a Midwesterner at heart, turned Californian. And after I did the bar exam and all that good stuff, I got my master's degree in tax law. So that technically makes me a tax attorney, but I usually introduce myself as a business attorney and tax professional.
I love it. I love it. So I do this for everyone. So don't think like, oh, she just went on a huge deep dive I always go look at people's websites. The first thing that I want to comment on is your herky. Y'all, you have to go look at Braden's website and see his background picture is a herky. I was a cheerleader since I was like 4. So I immediately spotted this and I was like, I have to ask him about this joke. So please, we must know, where did this picture originally from? Like what's going on here?
Oh yeah. Well, it's kind of just one of those, I was always like a really rambunctious child. My sisters were cheerleaders. I never was a cheerleader, but my oldest sister cheered in college. So she did the whole thing. And so I don't really know, as like a young gay kid, I probably was just like doing toe touches for fun in our living room. But the reason for the herky is because I'm really just a lot more flexible on one side. So like a proper toe touch, I can't do that well. And there we go. That's it.
Well, it was just the first thing I saw. Well, because you're super athletic, like you're training. Okay, I Instagram stalk you as well. So you're training for a marathon or Ironman? What is this that you're training for?
Ironman. So I'm training for Ironman California, which is at the end of October. So I know this is coming out in October. So it might be, when people are listening to this, I'll probably be like a week or two away from my Ironman triathlon. So everyone can go follow me on Instagram to get all the details. But yeah, it's a very long triathlon. After we're done recording this podcast, I have an hour and a half long bike ride and then a 1 hour run and then a CrossFit class. That's my workout for the day.
Oh my gosh. Oh, bless you. No, I did one of the extreme, like Tough Mudders. Nope, that's it. Like I just told him, I was like, nope, it's not gonna, this body, it's not gonna happen at this point. I'm like, I've been an athlete all my life. I've had 3 kids and I'm just like, mama can run 3 miles pretty well and do that on a consistent basis. That's as far as and I do it for my mental health more than anything. So yeah. I'm like, I'm done, but we're going to be cheering for you. So everybody that's listening, like we're going to send all the prayers and good vibes that you're just like, you're going to finish. Is that your goal? Do you have like a personal best that you're trying to beat? Like what?
Yeah, this will be Ironman number 4. So my goal, like I've done the like train just to finish kind of thing. This time my goal is to to PR, get my best time. Still not contending for like any kind of trophies or anything like that. But my goal is to do sub 12 hours. I want to go under 12 hours. So there we go.
Oh my gosh, 12 hours. That's
I know
amazing. That's amazing.
get
Okay, well,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh yeah, I was going to say
We're both like we're hand talkers.
You get 17 hours to finish. The pros finish like around 9 hours. So 12's kind of like in the middle there.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Well, like I said, we're going to be cheering you on. And I could just keep talking about all the casual stuff, but people are like, can you please just get to the legal stuff? Because that's really what it is. But I just want y'all to know that Braden is someone that you want to follow because he's not like most lawyers. Like we had to just establish that. Like that is what that context was for, is he's not some boring attorney that's going to like not show personality and really make a connection with you. And so I want to go from there because you're someone who's been in the online business space. You kind of came on my radar, I guess, about a year ago because we've both have taken Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy, and you just had great success through that way. And that's kind of how we connected, by those worlds intersecting. And some of the things that I've really admired in following you is showing up with so much personality. And I warned everybody before we started recording, there's going to be lots of expletives as we talk about your business, because I love how just out there you put everything. And I just have to ask, because your book is called Unfuck Your Biz, you know, your podcast, like all the things. And people have come to me and said, I want to do that, but I'm scared. I'm a little nervous about it. So tell us about that journey. Like, is that something that you just kind of put it all out there from day one, or was that a gradual, let's baby step into this? How did that look like?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a baby step. Like when I started my law firm, if you can believe it or not, like I started out like thinking that I needed to be much more traditional law practice. I wouldn't say I went as far as like wearing suits every day, but I would wear, you know, like dark denim jeans and a button up and dress shoes. And that was like my casual vibe. And it kind of evolved from there. And eventually I just realized, well, I can dress like someone who works in Silicon Valley, right? Like that can be my vibe, hoodies, shorts, the whole thing, and it works perfectly fine. So the casual language kind of came with that. Now, I will let you know, Crystal, that I am actually backtracking on this a little bit. We're actually going through a little bit of a branding pivot right now. It's not something I've announced anywhere, but the book and the podcast names are going to stay, but my signature program is going to scrap the F-bomb. Mostly because like we can't run Facebook ads to it. And when I go on some podcasts, the podcast hosts just they basically they won't rate any of their episodes as explicit, so they can't say the name. They have to censor it. Some affiliates have told me that while they believe in the program, they're hesitant to promote a program with the swear word in the title. So it still feels like me, but we're going to kind of split the difference with a little bit.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Yeah. Well, this is really interesting because I know everybody listening loves to hear a good behind the scene. And I think that it's important to know like where the mindset is. And as you rebrand or you relaunch something, understanding why someone does it. Because I think that if you just change things on a dime, people are like, wait, what happened? Like you'll always have that one like cohort in like your diehard fans that are like, no, don't ever change it. We love everything just the way that it is. And then you'll always have the people that are like, oh, I would love to do this or promote it if it was just a little bit different. You can't make everybody happy, obviously,
No.
but I love hearing the behind the scenes because I do get that question a lot. It's like, I want to put myself out there this way, but I just don't really know how. And I really appreciate all the language that you use on your website because it's just very quick to the point of like, oh, he's someone I want to work with, or, oh, maybe his brand isn't for me. And I think that kind of, it's not so much polarizing, but it is in the sense that like I love him because he does herkies on his website. Like, can I just say, come out and say that? Like, that's the thing for me. It like drew me in immediately.
It's actually like intended to be polarizing, right? Though, because it's the whole attract and repel marketing thing. So if someone's offended that my course is called Unfuck Your Biz, like they're probably not going to do well in the group setting that we have anyway. Like on our calls, people swear that's just the way it works. So I've had about 300 exit surveys, or post-launch surveys of, why people didn't buy. I've only had 2 people ever tell me they didn't buy because of the swear words. And that's fine because those people weren't going to be a great fit. But if marketing the program if I'm having trouble marketing the program and getting the message out there, then to me, that's like a bigger problem than the people who are put off by the language. So we're keeping the swear words in our sales copy. We're just taking it out of the course title.
Yeah. I love it. Just making those little tweaks. Well, I want to go back to your podcast. So everybody that's listening, they love a good story. We love a good behind the scenes of why you started your podcast. When did you launch it? Like, just give us all the dirty details behind your podcast.
Yeah. So I now am on my second podcast. My first podcast I launched in 2018. And that one was like, actually, no, sorry. It was the beginning of 2019. Doesn't matter. But at first it was very general. It was kind of like everything business for anyone and everyone. And that went nowhere fast, as you can imagine. I don't have the audience to really be that general. So I needed to niche it down. Like I was interviewing, people on how to grow a podcast and people on how to build an Instagram. I don't teach marketing. So like, why was I doing that? Don't know. So we took a bit of a hiatus and I relaunched at the end of that year, the Unfuck Your Biz podcast. And that's when I was like, you know what? I'm an attorney. I talk about taxes. Let's make a podcast that only talks about legal tips, tax tips, and money tips for creative entrepreneurs. So we relaunched it and started to see more success. The audience still isn't huge, but it's speaking to the people that I need it to speak to, and it's doing the work that we need it to do. So we are now, I think, around like 185 episodes in.
That's awesome. And tell me a little bit about like your show structure. So do you do solo interview? How long are your episodes? How often do you publish?
So it's a mix of both. When I started the podcast, we did 2 episodes a week. I don't know why I keep saying we. It's just me. I did 2 episodes a week. Every Tuesday, I did like a 5 to 10 minute episode where I took one question from my Facebook group and answered it on the podcast. And then on Thursdays, I did my longer episodes, which really were like 15 to 20 minutes if it was a solo episode, or 20 to 30 minutes if it was an interview. I find that about 15 minutes is all people really want to spend if they're digging into like really nitty gritty, like tax and legal topics. So I try to keep them shorter, and that's basically the structure. So now I kind of do series. So in the new year, I did like 2 months of like finance related episodes. And then I kind of pivoted to like contracts for a month. So that way I can chunk out like 3 to 4 episodes at a time that all build on top of one another.
Yeah, that's really smart. And I've only done a few series since I've really been podcasting because I get so many very specific questions and I'm like, I just got to answer this. Like it's come up over and over. So I really like the idea of series, and I think that it can work really well, especially, you have a cyclical everything's cyclical around tax season. So you can plan for it every year. You're like, okay, every March, I can just do like a boot camp or something to get everybody ready for tax season, or at the beginning of the year. Obviously I'm not in tax. I'm like, I don't know anything about it. My husband does our taxes. So I don't know anything about any of that, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's actually kind of how.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's kind of how I do it. Basically, it's just kind of like a schedule, and then we fill in the in-between gaps with the interviews is how I tend to structure it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I want to switch gears real fast and talk about your I'm just going to use you as my attorney for a second, even though you're not giving me legal advice. And for anybody listening, he's not giving you legal advice, but I want to give you some of the questions that I often get asked about LLCs and setting up a podcast and whether someone needs one. Because the question I get over and over again in our community is, do I need an LLC before I start my podcast? Or can I start it and create one afterwards? Or do I need to do like a doing business as? So what are your thoughts on those? And I know it could possibly be different based on where someone's located, but just generally, what advice would you give to someone?
The general advice is that an LLC is never a bad idea. There's no drawback to forming an LLC other than the cost of forming it. And cost, the cost is going to be relative to how much money you have, right? So the purpose of an LLC is that it protects your personal assets. But there are actually a lot of exceptions to how that works that a lot of people don't realize. It's not going to get you out of like every bit of trouble. It's one of what I call the layers of protection for your business. So you need to have insurance, you have to have contracts, and you have to have an LLC. Now from there, kind of the broader question is you have to ask yourself, is my podcast a business in and of itself? In which case, should it have its own LLC? Or is it a revenue stream or a marketing stream within my existing business? In which case, we just get an LLC for your existing business. Now, when in doubt, it's always great if we can form the LLC before you start a business, but that's not how everyone operates. Ideally, you want to do it before, but if you've already been in business for a while, you can do it now. Earlier, the better kind of thing.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So I recently, it's been a few years now, but I didn't have an LLC set up. So look, can we just air out the mistakes that I've made? Because maybe this will just be more relatable for everybody. I didn't have an LLC when I started my first podcast, and then I rebranded, and then I formed my LLC, and I was like, okay, well, the podcast will be under there, and then I need to go create like separate accounts because now I have these expenses that are coming in and these different, and I wanted to keep everything personal and business separate. And I get this question asked a lot where people say, well, I don't know how serious I'm going to be about my podcast. So how should I keep everything separate? I know what my answer is, but I want to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So again, this kind of depends on whether your podcast is its own business or whether it's part of a business. So for example, in my business, my podcast is a marketing channel underneath, like within the bubble of my business. So all of my expenses related to that just get lumped into my other categories. So advertising expense, office expense, etc. If I wanted to, in my bookkeeping, I could have subcategories for any expenses related to my podcasts. I probably wouldn't do that unless your podcast is something that you want to be like a pretty high percentage revenue generator in your business. Then it would be good for financial analysis to chunk it out. If the podcast is its own thing, unrelated to another business, or it's a business in and of itself, then yeah, you still want to have it separated, but it's going to be a lot simpler, right? Like you might not need to go open a QuickBooks account if all you're paying for is, and I don't know what you recommend, but I use Libsyn for a long time. So I'll just say Libsyn, but $15 a month for Libsyn. And then maybe you have like an editor. You're not going to have a lot of expenses, but you should at least track those in a spreadsheet and maintain a separate bank account for them. We don't want to commingle any of our personal and business money.
Y'all heard it from Braden. He said all the things that I typically tell y'all, but I just wanted to say, like, I'm like, I have a feeling this is what he's going to say, because I mean, this is like from the get-go. Like I said, I'm just a very risk-averse person. I'm like, I don't want the IRS. I don't want anybody coming knocking on my door. Anybody just like, you did something wrong. I think that it's because I am like the A student. And I'm like, no, I don't want to get a bad mark. I don't want to do that. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser. Y'all know this by now. But I want to go back into more about your own podcast journey and how you use it for your business. Because again, like I said, I was on your website, I'm stalking you, looking at all your things. And I love how you have your freebies front and center. You have how people can work with you. And so I want to talk about, what role does your podcast play, as in, is it bringing, generating leads for your business? Is it just education? Like, how do you see your podcast playing into your overall business?
Yeah. So honestly, this is where I could probably use some of your help, because I think in a lot of ways, my podcast could be optimized like so much more. Right now, and this was the learning curve for me, was that when I started my podcast, I expected it to be a lead generator, and that's not really how it worked. Or how it has worked. I found that's the way it works for a lot of podcasters. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But for me, I consider it a nurturing platform, right? So people usually find me more so by doing guest interviews on podcasts like this one. And then I introduce them to my podcast, and that's where they get nurtured, right? The other thing I've really found is that there are some people, I think, that tune into my podcast every single week and listen to it kind of episodically. But most people, they find it, they binge it, they do all the legal and tax things that they think that they need to do. And now they're like, all right, I don't really want to listen to like legal and tax tips anymore. I like got it figured out, moving on. So I see like spikes in my listenership, and kind of makes sense for the type of content, I think.
Yeah. Well, I like this. And I will tell you what I tell everybody else, and that is, there are no rules when it comes to podcasting. Like the people that say there are like hard and fast rules and you got to stay in these boxes. I tell everybody, run away from those people, please, as quickly as possible, because it's going to be different for everybody. There could be 4 other people that do legal and tax advice, or, they do consulting services, or they have programs listening to this podcast right now, and they're going to do it 4 different ways than how you do it. And it could be successful in different ways. So I always let people know, education is always a great place to start. Lead generation is a great place to start, but also just having those little connections. Like, people that heard us talking about you doing an Ironman are going to be like, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about doing an Ironman. And this is why I love podcasting, because you can pull out some of those stories more so than you can if you just see someone's website, right? Y'all wouldn't know that. And so that's what I really enjoy about the podcast. But I just love hearing all the behind the scenes. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you have any other questions about your podcast? I would love to, like, let's talk about that.
Oh yeah.
I have more tax questions for you, but go ahead.
I was like, we could probably dig into lots of questions. Well, some of the other things I will share that we're doing as well is I'm going back to doing monthly profit reports on my podcast. That's something I did for a while, stopped doing, bringing it back, because a lot of what I talk about is focusing on a profitable business, not just a revenue generating business. I did an episode recently on my credit journey. So we get very personal. I get very personal on the podcast. And then the other thing that I really try to leverage it as is like a really solid content bank. So whenever we have questions in our Facebook group, we try to do our best. My community manager links them to past episodes that we use. And then inside of my courses, if I have a really applicable podcast episode, I'll link them to a podcast rather than creating like another 45-minute training. So that's been helpful as well. I guess for me, like my main question for you would be like, how much should I be focused on growing like the listenership of my podcast? Or is that like not something I should be too focused on? I don't know.
Well, I think that for someone like you, you're going to have those. no matter what, I mean, even if you change up a little bit of your content and how you're presenting it, you're always going to have those spikes, like right around the first of the year and right around tax time. If that's what you're talking about, you're going to have those spikes. You're going to have those people that come in, listen. It's the same for my podcast. One of my number one episodes, I mean, it's in my top 5, is how to start a podcast. And it was one of the very first ones that I ever did. And people will come, download that episode, listen to it, and never come back. And that's okay, because hopefully they're sharing it with someone else saying, hey, I didn't know how to start a podcast and I went and listened to that episode. So I think that growing your listenership happens organically over time. And that's the best way to grow. And people get so frustrated when I say that. But it's also the thing that I hear from all these really big podcasts that have been doing it for a long time. They're like, I've been doing this for a decade. I better have thousands of listeners because I've been doing this for so long. And so I think that growing your listenership is going to continue to happen as you put out episodes. And the only thing that I always tell people is just stay consistent. Whatever you do, stay consistent, because you never know. Like, I know recently, like, you've been featured across, Amy Porterfield stuff, like being part of her DCA launch and all the things that she's doing. So you're going to have natural kind of amplifications of your brand, and people will find you. And a lot of those people will come and hang out and say, oh my gosh, like, he's the legal guy I've been looking for. I want to go see what he's doing. And there's going to be also like ebbs and flows of your journey. But I always just love, I can't remember who the original quoter was, but it's always up and to the right. Like, that's always what you're looking for, is as long as things are just going upwards and they're not totally falling off the cliff, then that's definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think consistency is huge for sure. I mean, I can tell you, there are 2 podcasts that I love and I listen to religiously, and both of them have really erratic uploading schedules, and it drives me bananas. One of them I can tell is like not really monetized. So for them, I'm like, I kind of understand. They just record when they can. But also as a listener, I try to tell myself, well, they don't owe me anything, right? I can't get frustrated if they don't upload. But then as a business person, I'm
right.
like, why don't you have this dialed in? Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to go back for a second, because it just kind of like triggered something you said earlier about, making profit and not just focusing on revenue, because there's a lot of people that are in our community, and that's the first thing they want to do. They're like, I want to start a podcast and I want to monetize it. Like, tomorrow I want to launch it and have millions of listeners, thousands of downloads, and all the things. And I'm like, here's a magic lamp, like, go rub it and hope that a genie pops out, because that's not what I'm here for. Like, it does not happen as often as you think it does. And so with that respect in mind, that people can start their podcast businesses and grow them slowly over time, what are some of the things that they should be looking at if they do start making a little bit of that affiliate money, or they decide to create a course and start selling it? What are some of those beginner mistakes that you see a lot of people make?
Well, we could always talk about not saving and paying taxes. That's like a whole different can of worms. So circle back to that if we want. But yeah, when it comes to the profitability, I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to know your numbers. So you have to track, well, what's my revenue? And then you also need to be tracking your expenses, so you know what your profit is. And of course, and you can give more specifics on this, but I would imagine like you have to have a pretty big podcast for the podcast in and of itself to be that profitable, to net you that amount of money. For me, like
Right.
for the longest time, my signature program was a $2,000 course. So I would say if one, 2 or 3 podcast listeners buy my course, like I'm going to have a pretty good ROI. My overhead's very low. So those are the things that we want to think about. And then, of course, we have to get into KPIs as well, tracking our key performance indicators, all that good stuff when we're talking about, is this really worth it? Is this doing what I need it to be doing? And if not, like, what do I need to tweak to get it there?
Oh, this is really good, especially because it can be very hard to measure the return on investment with a podcast, especially as soon as you get started and you're just trying to figure out, like, maybe you're trying new things and you're like, okay, how long? And maybe this is a question we can both kind of go back and forth on, because I wouldn't even know how long to tell someone to podcast before they say, well, your KPIs aren't really hitting. I mean, I don't know, because I'm thinking about like from a financial standpoint, not from necessarily listenership, but is there anything that you would like hold up as like, I need to hit this with my show? Or are you just kind of, I'm just putting out content and using this as how I want to connect with my audience?
Well, first of all, I feel like for something like a podcast, you need to commit for a year. Like that's probably how long it's going to take to really get traction. I feel like that's what I would tell people. When it comes to the KPIs and the analytics, it is really difficult, right? So like if you wanted to, like if you're selling a course like I am, when people join the course, you could survey them and ask them like, how did you originally find me? And if they answer podcasts, like great, but still you're going to miss a ton of data there too, because I do a debrief every time I launch and I figure out where the person found me. Oh, you found me on Crystal's podcast. Awesome. I should do more podcast pitches. This is what this data is telling me, right? But they may have found me here, but they may have been nurtured for 6 months by listening to my podcast before they were ready to make a buying decision. And that's the metric that we can't really measure very well. But I think if we talk to our own people enough, we can get an instinctual understanding for that, right? Like I have a lot of students who after they join my program, I always feel like no one's listening to my podcast, but then a handful of them will be like, oh, someone introduced me to you 3 months ago or 2 months ago, and I binged like 50 of your episodes, and then I joined your next launch. That's what happens a lot with my audience. They find me, they binge a lot of episodes, they join the next time I open the doors. So can I track that on a spreadsheet very well? No, but I have qualitative data. I don't have quantitative data, but I have qualitative data to back it up.
This is so good. I actually, now that you say that, I'm curious, is that kind of reflective of your own buying habits? Like, do you do that whenever you buy a course or you sign up with a mentorship program? Like, is it like, tell me a little bit about your own buying habits and I'll tell you about mine.
Sure. So I think this was actually on Amy's podcast. I think Tarzan K talked about this. If anyone follows her, I know it's very popular, like kind of sales lingo too. So a lot of other people talk about this, but it's the different like buying personalities and they assign colors to them or whatever. And I always thought that I was a really quick action taker, because when it comes to implementation, I am very quick. I'll buy a course, I'll do the whole course, I'll have it implemented in 2 weeks. But what I realized is that I am actually very, very slow to pull the trigger on making a buying decision. And I follow people for a long time and watch a lot of their content. But by the time I decided that I want to work with this person, at that point, I don't need their webinar and I don't need the post-sale sequence and I don't need all that stuff. I just need the offer and I'm ready to buy. So for me, it's a long lead up and then it's a quick buying decision once I found like my person. And I think some of my audience is like that, but honestly, I think it's quite a bit different because a lot of what I teach, they're just like, there aren't people out there on the market offering similar offers to what I have. So people have they have a problem that they need help with. And as soon as they find me and know that I can help them with their problem, they're typically like ready to buy pretty quickly. Whenever I do my launch debriefs, I find that about 30 to 40% of the people who'd bought my $2,000 program had been on my email list for less than 2 months, which was always pretty surprising, or at least when I started figuring that out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so funny because that's exactly how I am. Like I know exactly which podcast episode you're talking about with Tarzan. I actually did a webinar where she was like, she was comparing people that buy to like Game of Thrones characters. And I was so about it. It was so good. It was so good. And she did all these comparisons. And I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, well, I'm like super quick. Like as soon as I see it, I buy. But I'm exactly like that. I remember I followed Amy for probably a year and a half before I ever bought anything from her because I was so green in the online business space that I was like, I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know what I didn't know. And the more that I learned on her podcast, I was like, oh, she's got more. There's more. I just remember I felt like I was going through one of those fun houses and opening doors. And I was like, wait, I didn't even know list building was in here. What is landing pages? Like, what are all these things? But then whenever everything was like packaged, like I'm just such a believer in like serendipitous moments of like, this is
Mm-hmm.
the right time. I will purchase something, implement it, like you said. And it's like, it's done. Like I did the whole thing, but there was a lot of lead up to it. So it's really interesting. I love to hear people's buying behaviors because it's so different for every person. And we have to remember that in our businesses. And that's one thing that I don't want to believe in my own business. I want to believe everybody's just like me, but I'm glad to hear that you and I are similar.
Yeah. The other thing I've learned in this process is that I actually like to be sold to. Like I usually, before I buy something, I need someone to convince, like I need you to convince me why I need to buy it. I don't want to go research like why I need you to buy it. I need you to sell me on it. And this actually makes sense because my Myers-Briggs type is called the debater. Like we're analytical thinkers, but we like to kind of play devil's advocate, and like some people view it as arguing, but really you're like, well, I have to kind of argue every point and I need you to debunk them before I can like agree with your position. No surprise I became an attorney, right? But to me, that's what the sales process is. Like you need to address all my objections like on your podcast. And if you do that well enough, like I'm probably going to be ready to buy your thing. And interestingly, like this realization has made me a much more willing marketer because now I'm like less hesitant to send the 84 sales emails. Cause I'm like, on the flip side, as a consumer, like I need those to be ready to buy. So let's send another email, record another podcast.
Oh, yes, this is so good. Like I really truly believe that you just gave a gift to like 20 people listening to the show right now. They're like, "Oh, I needed to hear that. I needed to remember that," because it's something that we just think, "Oh, I don't really need to do it. I'm bugging them or I'm bothering them." Nope, just record another podcast, send another email, and just keep going and keep that consistency up for sure, because someone's out there, and who knows, the next one could be the one where they say, Braden is totally my guy. Like I don't want any more, like shut down the blind, like put the blinders on. I don't need any more legal tax advice from anybody else. I just want to learn from Braden for sure. Well,
Yeah,
I wanted to get into, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the
Go ahead.
only time I ever unsubscribe from someone's email list is if I'm following like 3 copywriting educators and I've decided like this is the one that I would buy from if and when I'm ready to buy a copywriting course. So I don't need to hear from these other 2 people. And that sounds harsh, but like on the flip side of that, it's like you shouldn't really mind if you lost me as a subscriber because like I wasn't going to buy from you anyway, right? I've never really unsubscribed like because I've been like that annoyed by someone. No.
Yeah, that's really good. That's another fear that people often have too. They're like the unsubscribe. So, and I'm like, it's just going to happen. It's going to happen. But I love to hear that take. It's like, no, I like follow a bunch of people. And then I'm like, this is the only person I want to hear from. And I totally subscribe to that. I think it's a great mindset to have, especially as you're building your own email list. Cause we get it as marketers. We get it. We're not going to be for some people, and that is totally fine. It's totally fine. But I want to move into, I have some rapid fire questions for you. So are you up for that?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. So what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster?
Be yourself. Have fun. Like let your own personality show through your podcast. And that's what's going to attract the audience that would, want to keep tuning in.
That's great. So this next one is a 2-part question. The first one is, what is the dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest?
Well, I've been wanting to get on Amy's podcast. I've done like an audio clip for her podcast, but not a one-on-one interview. That would be great. As far as a podcast guest, I don't think I could answer that one because everyone that I would be like, oh my God, it'd be so cool to talk to them. Like okay, I'll take that back. If I could get someone like Amy to come on and do like this is an inside look at my revenue, expenses, and profit, that would be a dream guest.
That would be so awesome. Yeah, it would be so fun to see like behind the scenes of how everything goes down. Very, very cool. Okay, and then the last question I have is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
No. No, not at all.
I love the laugh right behind it. No.
Yeah, and like you could ask all my VAs or like anyone that ever works with me. People email me all the time. Hey, I saw a typo like in this blog post, and in the back of my, like, I'm kind of a smart ass, so like my gut reaction is like, well, did you still understand it? Okay, great. Like I'm not going to, like, I don't have time to edit it. I'm not going to edit it. So sometimes I'll like forward the emails to my VA, and I'm like, fix this if you want to, if you have time. I don't really care.
Oh yeah. This is so good. It's so good. And you know what? I think that the more I get into my business and the more things that are like the balls that are in the air and the things that you're trying to juggle, I'm the exact same way. I'm just like, oh, okay. Thank you. But I'm just going to move on with my life. I appreciate it, but I'm going to keep going. Yes. Thank you. Well, Braden, this has been so much fun. And I would love it if you would share a little bit about maybe what you have going on. Cause I know whenever this episode goes live, you have a few fun new things happening in the future, but I actually want to ask about your book. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and what that's all about and who it would be a good fit for?
Sure. So my book titled Unfuck Your Biz is available at unfuckyourbizbook.com. We have a hardback book and an ebook and an audiobook. And really it's ideal. It's written for people who've already been in business for about a year or two. And now they're like, okay, I'm serious. These are all the things I probably should have done. Now I need to do them. I talk about LLCs, S Corps, the differences, business licenses, basic bookkeeping tips, really all of the legal and tax fundamentals for business owners. So the book's great. It will kind of give you the rundown and the framework that I teach inside of my signature program.
Awesome. And we'll have a link to everything that Braden has going on, but y'all go follow him on Instagram. You have to go follow him and keep up because like we said, if it's October when this airs, like he's going to be right around the corner from his race and we got to be cheering him on, like sending him the high fives, the emojis saying, come on, you got this. We're going to be your personal best for sure. But what is the name of your community? Because you have a Facebook group. Is that open to anyone or is that just for your students?
Yeah, the Facebook group is open to everyone. It's called Braden's Besties. So if you just go to bradensbesties.com, that will auto forward you to the Facebook group. So people can go there. We take questions. So if you submit a question, we're actually trying out a private podcast right now to answer those questions as opposed to the Facebook Lives we were doing. But regardless of what the nitty-gritty details of that looks like, we have a lot of resources in there to get you specific answers to your questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Braden.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I knew as soon as we got on this call that Braden was just going to over-deliver on information, on the experience of his journey. And I'm so grateful that you got to hear this conversation because I think it was so smart in how he has really transitioned through his business and evolved. And I think that he's so much fun. I love following him on Instagram. Like I said, his journey, like his fitness journey, I was cracking up the other day because we had recorded this a few weeks ago. And then I was following his stories and he had posted a selfie. This was so funny. He was like, this is a selfie, and it was pitch black. So the writing on there was like, this is a selfie. I'm training in the morning. And because his race is coming up, right? He's like, I'm training in the morning. I just wanted to document this is how pitch black it is out here. And yet I'm doing it anyway. So I love the fact that he just shares so much. I love his personality. And it was just such a great conversation. So go check him out. Go check out his book. Go check out his podcast and see if Braden could be a fantastic fit for you as someone to learn from and just keep on keeping on, y'all. This is so awesome that y'all want information like this and y'all keep asking for people that are in this space of giving you business advice that's above and beyond what I can give you, right? Because I know y'all don't just want to hear from me. Y'all want to hear about these things when it comes to managing your assets and really taking control of your role as the person that's running your business and being able to make some incredible strides in this world with your special message. So go to the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 296 to check out Braden. Go follow him on Instagram, y'all. Go cheer him on, give him some high fives and show him all the love for his race that's coming up. But that is all I have for you today. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.